Hello and welcome to part 9 of my video lecture series on Martin Heidegger's Being and Time. This video is going to be talking about the second chapter of the second part of Being and Time. This chapter called The Attestation of Dasein of an Authentic Potentiality-of-Being and Resoluteness. And it's going to be about mainly, two concepts that are linked together. The idea, or Heidegger's idea of conscience and later resoluteness. And again, like many cases with Heidegger, he uses the word conscience to refer to something which we don't normally mean by conscience. It is something that calls us to finally engage with the world or engage with our being authentically. It's not, again, a common theme. It's not clear with this concept where it comes from or what the actual experience is. Because again, it's not what we usually think of as conscience. But that itself could mean it's not the usual interpretation of the standard experience of what we call conscience. It could be either that, or I've heard that, but I've also heard and read that it's an experience that is actually linked to this attunement of anxiety. I will say, but I'd have a difficulty with that interpretation just because the experience or the attunement of anxiety seems to be a rare event for Dasein, and so it seems just very unsatisfactory that being authentic through conscience, being able to hear conscience would be such a rare thing for people to experience. But it talks about it in a way that it's something that, we all are confronted with, or we all experience. So that makes me want to think that it is actually referring to this normal or this common sense interpretation of what we mean by conscience. I cannot sort that out completely. But I'm going to stick then to this interpretation that it is this common sense interpretation of, or this common sense phenomenon of conscience, but it differs in the interpretation of what this conscience is. So it is an experience of what Heidegger calls he calls it a call. That we're doing something in our lives and we are called to, that is where the difference of the differences are of interpretation. And again, it's going to be a difference between the interpretations of the they and the interpretation of authentic Dasein, what this call actually is. So in the interpretation of the they, the conscience is some type of explicit, linguistic, concrete call to act to a particular action, and also that this action is it is called to act in accordance with a kind of universal ideal. So it is this transcendent, culturally understood thing that is the same for everyone. I mean, culturally understood that it is coded in language, and that's what I mean. But then Heidegger says that the authentic interpretation of this phenomenon, there we experience the call as actually as it's silent. It doesn't call us to any particular action. It doesn't call us to with concrete guidelines of what we ought to do in a certain situation. And it is not a moral call of conscience. It is not a moral phenomena, really. But what we are called to is to realize the openness of our potentiality, you could say. That we are actually free to act in a different way or than what the culture calls for. And it calls us to realize our ungroundedness and to deal with that and to embrace that. And it brings us to actually another concept that Heidegger wants us to realize, or that we will realize with this call to conscience, is that we come to terms with what he calls guilt. And again, he's going to say that, well, he's going to use this word guilt, but we don't mean a sense of being guilty of a crime of some sort. I think. But what this guilt word is meant to capture is actually two related concepts or ideas of indebtedness and responsibility. Because we are indebted, our being is indebted to our culture, maybe like things like our history, our biology, the background that has allowed us to begin with, and that we come into this world not by our own volition, but we come into this world really by the choice of others, by the choice of our parents. And we find ourselves as being a particular person in a particular time, in a particular culture, as a particular type of being. And that means that our viewpoints are actually limited by that history. And to see that we are not, we are constrained by this background in our being. But he wants to express that as actually being, well, we are indebted to this background, because that is actually what allows us to have perceptions and to have views and to have ways of looking at the world and life and ourselves. Those conceptions we have indebted to our background, our ground, is what Heidegger wants to say. So that's indebtedness. But then we are responsible also, because while our background is constrains us and predetermines us in many ways, our future is actually open. Maybe that we don't have infinite, or maybe infinite possibilities, but our possibilities are not like anything we could imagine. They are still constrained, I would like to think. But we are free to choose within a essentially endless number of possibilities. And that and we are actually responsible for picking a path forward all the time, and to go back and always realize that we are have this responsibility of acting and picking out, okay, what should I actually, given that who I am, what should I actually do? We have to decide what action to take going forward. And then I want to say that I have come across in the other sources that I've been reading in this series, at least two ideas that kind of hint that we are guilty in some real sense. And the first one is that we are kind of guilty of not embracing this true human condition of freedom, mainly. That we abdicate that freedom to belong to the day, to act as one does rather than as what you ought. I don't want to say how you would want to act, but how you should act according to your own standards. maybe. But at the very least, we are guilty of throwing this freedom aside all the time, and staying within this inauthentic mode of being where we hide away in the they self. The other sense that we're guilty is that we are, by virtue of being part of this they ourselves, we are sort of inhibiting other Daseins from being their authentic selves as well. So maybe we have some kind of guilt in that sense. And this type of background and forwards freedom into the future, that is going to be why Heidegger says, I don't remember which page or so, but somewhere he says that Dasein is the null ground of a nullity. And I just wanted to mention that because it's one of those strange things that Heidegger says that sort of sounds very profound or complicated. But what it really means is what I just said about this. First of all, the ungroundedness of our being, that we didn't that our ground, we didn't choose it ourselves. We were sort of thrown into it. So it's not by this, like, that is not by a clear choice, and it didn't have to be the way that it is. But is perhaps another key point to bring up there. And so it is kind of arbitrary in a sense. That's why it's called, and that's why it's null. And the nullity of the future refers to the part where we have these seemingly infinite possibilities, but we only choose one possibility in each instance. So most possibilities we actually throw away, or we nullify the potential. So given all the things that we could be, most of them are not actualized. So we are mostly null. That's how the logic goes. So that's why we can say such a thing. And then if we have this called the conscience, and we hear it authentically, and we decide to embrace it authentically, to accept this fact that we have that our ground is null and our future is open. If we accept that authentically, then that attitude is called resoluteness for Heidegger. And if we shy away from that and bury ourselves in the day once again, then we're not resolute. So yeah, that's sort of the extent of resoluteness of what I can gather. Then there is one complicated thing at the very end of this chapter, because, like I said, the call to conscience authentically heard does not encourage us to act in, or does not encourage us towards a particular action, but to realize the openness of our future and the arbitrary ungroundedness of our background. But he still says that if we embrace this condition authentically and we are resolute, then what is going to be revealed to us is something he calls a situation, which implies certain conditions where you are encouraged to act in a certain way, which doesn't seem to go along with what is said in the beginning. And I'm not the only one who has picked up on this contradiction, so I feel justified in my confusion of the subject. Luckily, he doesn't build upon this idea of situation much more after that, so I don't think it matters too much if you don't understand this particular concept. But that's pretty much the extent of this chapter. So yeah, thanks for watching.